right. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a couple people that are trickling in, but we'll go ahead and do announcements so we don't waste any more time. So we just have about 3 things that we want to talk about before the presentation this afternoon. The first thing is that we're happy to announce that the 4th Annual Dean's Appreciation Reception is scheduled for Monday, November 20th from 4:30 to 6. The actual program is going to begin at 5. Desserts and light refreshments will be served at the reception. And then we just want to make sure that you all know or note that this is a change from previous years, whereas the last few years it's been the Thursday before Thanksgiving. It's going to be on the Monday, the week of Thanksgiving. So just make sure that you go ahead and note your calendars for that. And at the reception, we're going to announce the winners of the Dean Staff Awards. This year, based on the high caliber, especially of last year's nominations, we expanded our awards to 7. And we will be sending nominees letters confirming their nominations here probably within this week. So if you are a nominee, you'll be getting one of those. And nominees will also be invited to a dinner with the dean that evening. The second thing we want to talk about is our final SMART program for 2017, which is next month. That is going to be on November 29th, so go ahead and mark your calendar for that as well. For that program, we're going to be doing a reorientation with human resources. So the purpose of that program, based on what the SMART Leadership Committee discussed, is to provide employees, especially those who have been at U of L and the School of Medicine for a long time, an opportunity to refresh their knowledge about opportunities, benefits, and other options that are available to you as a U of L employee. So look at it as kind of a second orientation just to refresh your memory on what kinds of things are available to you. This will also be an opportunity for you to get some of your questions answered from HR. So if you have questions, feel free to bring those with you. We're still finalizing some details, but like I said, Wednesday, November 29th is the date that we're looking at. We'll send out an email invitation for an Eventbrite sign up here shortly, so look forward to that. We are rounding out the Common Ground Group presentation series. We have done 3 so far. We're actually having one today at the same time, unfortunately. But our final 2 presentations are, the first one's going to be for grandparents parenting grandchildren, and the second is going to be for parents of infants to 3-year-olds. And that one is going to be done by Dr. Larry Wasser, who did a presentation at the SMART Retreat back in May. They're largely informal presentations, so come lighthearted, ask questions, have a dialogue. It's not going to be anything formal, just bring yourself and have a good time. We are, again, finalizing details for that. We'll send out another invitation, and then we will have a new installment of the Common Ground Group presentation series in the spring semester, for a couple of the different Common Ground groups. In the meantime, if you all have any recommendations for presenters or presentations that you would like to see in these groups, or just any general Common Ground groups that you would like to see us create to foster some relationships between people in similar life experiences, please feel free to send those on to the Smart Service account, and we can try to get those set up for you. And that about wraps it up for the announcements. I wanted to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. The presenter for today's session is Stephanie Hodgkins. Stephanie is the program manager in the Department of Radiology, and she's the chair of the SMART's Community Engagement Committee. Stephanie's been practicing the work of Byron Katie for over 3 years, and today she's going to be showing you how to use the work to trace unhappiness to its source and deal with it there. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our presenter for today's program, Stephanie Hodgkins.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
And my ego is a little bit of a control freak. Who's with me? So I was on my way into work the other day, and this guy cut me off on the freeway. Like, totally cut me off. You should have heard the things that were running through my head about this guy. And my kids. Oh, my kids. I've got 2 of them. I have a 5-year-old girl and I have a 4-year-old boy. He just had a birthday. I keep on forgetting. And before I get out the front door, I usually have some sort of argument over why we need to wear pants. Pants. Why can't they just put on pants? Any pants, right? And sometimes I come into work and the person in front of me doesn't hold the door open for me. What a jerk, right? And then my boss, I'm just kidding. My boss is in the audience today. Does any of this sound familiar? What a stressful day. I am just now sitting down to my first cup of coffee, and I am already ready for my evening glass of wine. And these are the kinds of things that can define our day, right? If we let them. If we let them. Seriously, Stephanie, that's it? Don't let it get to you? No, there's more. But before I go any further, I want to get 2 things out of the way. Number 1, I have no financial interest in anything I'm getting ready to show you. And number 2, I have no qualifications to be presenting any of it either. I'm just a girl who can do a decent book report. Okay, so who is Byron Katie? Byron Katie was happy with a husband and 3 children, and then she became unhappy. She became severely depressed in her early 30s, and for almost a year she spiraled down into rage, self-loathing, constant thoughts of suicide. For 2 years, she was often unable to leave her bedroom, suffering from severe agoraphobia. And then one morning in February of 1986, she experienced a life-changing realization. There are various names for experiences like this, but Katie calls it waking up to reality. Katie saw that when she believed her thoughts, she suffered. And that when she didn't believe her thoughts, she didn't suffer. What had been causing her depression was not the world around her, but what she believed about the world around her. Instead of hopelessly trying to change the world to match her thoughts about how it should be, she could question these thoughts. And by meeting reality as it is, experience unimaginable freedom and joy. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to introduce you to a few basic principles. The first one is noticing when your thoughts argue with reality. We suffer when we believe a thought that argues with what is. Wanting reality to be different is like trying to teach a cat to bark. You can try and try and try, and at the end of the day, that cat is still going to look up at you and say, meow. But if you notice, you think thoughts like this dozens of times a day. People need to chill out and be kinder. Children should behave themselves. Wish my neighbor would take better care of his lawn. This line is taking forever. My spouse should agree with me on this. My life would be better if I were prettier, thinner, made more money. These thoughts are all ways of us wanting reality to be different than what it is. The work reveals to us that what you think shouldn't have happened, should have happened. It should have happened because it did happen. And no amount of thinking in the world is going to change that. Now, this doesn't mean that you approve of it, or condone it. It just means that you can see things without resistance and without the confusion of your inner struggle. No one wants their children to get sick. No one wants to have a car accident. But when these things happen, how can it be helpful to mentally argue with them? We know better than that, yet we do it anyway, because we don't know how to stop. I've become a big believer of what is, because I can see that it hurts when I argue with reality. The second concept is that of staying in your own business. This one is my favorite. Katie says, I can find only 3 kinds of business in the universe: mine, yours, and God's. And she points out that for her, the word God means reality. Reality is God because reality is what it is. Anything that's out of my control, your control, and everyone else's control She calls that God's business. A lot of our stress comes from mentally living outside of our own business. When I'm sitting over here thinking, you need to get a job. I want you to be happy. You should be on time. You need to take better care of yourself. I'm in your business. When I'm worried about hurricanes, the economy, nuclear war, or when I'm going to die, I'm in God's business. Think back to times that you have felt hurt or lonely. Were you in somebody else's business? If you're living your life, and I'm mentally living your life, who's over here living my life? Being mentally in your business keeps me from being present in my own. I am separate from myself, wondering why my life isn't working. If you understand these three kinds of business enough to stay in your own business, it could free your life in ways that you can't imagine. The third concept is meeting your thoughts with understanding. When Katie had her breakthrough, she noticed that she wasn't breathing, she was being breathed. And to her amazement, she noticed that she wasn't thinking either. She was being thought. Have any of you tried meditation? When you just sit still, close your eyes, take that deep breath, thoughts just appear, right? You can't control your thinking. Our thoughts come out of nothing, and then they go back to nothing. There is no harm in them unless we attach to them as if they were true. You can't let go of your thoughts, but you can learn to meet them with understanding, and then they can let go of you. A thought is harmless unless we believe it. It's not our thoughts themselves, but the attachment to our thoughts that causes suffering. Attaching to a thought means that we're believing that it's true without examining it. And a belief is a thought that we've been attaching to, sometimes for years. The fourth area of examination is becoming aware of your stories. Katie uses the word story to talk about thoughts that we convince ourselves are real. A story may be about the past, the present, or the future. It may be about what things should be, what they could be, or why they are. Stories appear in our minds hundreds of times a day. When someone gets up without a word and just walks out of the room, or when someone doesn't smile back at us, or doesn't return a phone call. Stories are the untested, uninvestigated theories that tell us what all these things mean. And we don't even realize that. They're just theories. Katie tells a story about going into a ladies' room once, and she went into the stall that this lady had just come out of, and the toilet seat was all wet. So she cleaned it off, and as she's cleaning it off, she's telling herself, I cannot believe how rude this person is. I'm going to go out there and give her a piece of my mind. She flushes the toilet, water shoots up, gets all over the toilet seat. And she just stood there and laughed. So this is what our thinking does, right? Small stories breed bigger ones. And then bigger stories breed major theories about life. Sometimes how terrible it is, sometimes how dangerous it is. How much of your world is made up of unexamined stories? The work always leaves you with less of your uncomfortable story. Who would you be without it? Next, let's talk about looking for the thought behind the suffering. In a previous life, I spent a lot of energy trying to change the world so that I could be happy. And if everyone was on a constant loop in my head, right? And it sounds funny coming out of my mouth now, but we all do this to an extent, don't we? And of course, this hasn't ever worked because it approaches the problem backwards. It's like when there's a piece of lint on the projector's lens, and you clean the screen and you change the screen. You try to change this person, you try to change that person. But until you clean that piece of lint off the projector itself, it's always going to be there. The work gives us a way to change the projector, the mind, rather than the projected. Behind every uncomfortable feeling, there is a thought that isn't true for us. We have a thought that argues with reality, then we have a stressful feeling. Then we act on that feeling, creating more stress for ourselves. So rather than understanding the original cause, a thought, we try to change our stressful feelings by looking outside ourselves. We try to change someone else. We reach for food, alcohol, drugs, money, in order to find temporary comfort and the illusion of control. Have you ever had a feeling that was so strong it just completely broadsided you? Yeah, no, okay. Maybe it's just me. It is easy to be swept away by some of these overwhelming feelings. When this happens, it is helpful to remember that this stressful feeling is kind of like a compassionate alarm clock that says, you are caught in a dream right now. Depression, pain, anger, fear, these are gifts that say, sweetheart, stop and take a look at what you're thinking right now. You're living a story that doesn't have to be true for you. Number 6, inquiry. Katie uses the word inquiry as synonymous with the work. To inquire or to investigate is to put a thought or story up against 4 questions and a turnaround. But it's more than just a technique. When practiced for a while, inquiry takes on a life of its own within you. It appears whenever thoughts appear, as their balance and mate. This internal partnership leaves you free to live as a kind, fearless, and even amused listener of your own thoughts. You become a student of yourself and a friend who can be trusted, not to resent, criticize, or hold a grudge. And eventually, realization is experienced automatically as a way of life. Peace and joy naturally, inevitably, and irreversibly make their way into every corner of your mind, into every relationship and experience. The process is so subtle that you may not even have any conscious awareness of it. You may only know that you used to hurt, and now you don't. Are you guys ready to give this a try? So this is really the guts of the work, the great undoing. It consists of 3 parts. Judge your neighbor, ask 4 questions, turn it around. So coming around now is a judge your neighbor worksheet. And this is super simple. The instructions are right there on the worksheet along with some examples. So the first step in this whole process is for you to write down your judgments about any stressful situation that's going on in your life, past, present, or future. This can be about a person that you dislike or worry about, a situation with someone who angers or frightens or saddens you, someone you're ambivalent or confused about. Write all of your judgments down, just the way that you think them. Don't be surprised when you're doing this if you want to self-edit. For thousands of years, we've been taught not to judge, but we still do it all the time, don't we? The truth is that we always have judgments running in our heads. These thoughts just appear. Through the work, we finally have permission to let those judgments speak out or even scream out on paper. And I'm going to let you write these, but while you're doing this, I'm going to keep talking just in case you need some prompts to kind of help you think about who or what you want to write about. Maybe think about someone whom you haven't yet totally forgiven for something. This can be the most powerful place to begin. Do not start with yourself. Write down your thoughts without trying to censor them. Sit with your pen and paper and just wait if you need to. The words will come, and the story will come. And if you really want to know the truth, if you're not afraid to see your story on paper, the ego will write like a maniac. This is the day that the ego has been waiting for. Give it its life on paper. It has been waiting for you to stop just once and really listen to it. It will tell you everything just like a child. I invite you to be judgmental, harsh, childish, and petty. Write with the spontaneity of a child who is sad, angry, confused, or frightened. And don't try to be wise, spiritual. Definitely don't try to be kind. This is the time to be totally honest and uncensored about how you feel. Allow your feelings to express themselves without any fear of consequences or any threat of punishment. Write down the thoughts and stories that are running through you, the ones that really cause you pain, the anger, the resentment, the sadness. Point the finger of blame first at people who have hurt you, the ones who have been closest to you, people you're jealous of, people you can't stand, people who've disappointed you. My husband left me. My mother didn't love me. My children don't respect me. My friend betrayed me. I hate my boss. I'm just kidding, Brittany. It's just an example. I hate my neighbors. Write about what you read this morning in the newspaper. Write about people being murdered or losing their homes through hurricanes or genocide. Write about the checker at the grocery store who was too slow, or about the driver who cut you off on the freeway. Every story that you write is a variation on a single theme. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't have to experience this. Life isn't fair. And if you're sitting there thinking at this point, gosh, nothing's really bothering me, just wait a minute. Life will give you a topic. Maybe a friend didn't call you back when she said she would, and you're disappointed. Or maybe when you were 5 years old, your mother punished you for something you didn't do. Maybe you're upset or frightened when you read the news. Put on paper the part of your mind that is saying these things. You can't stop the story inside your head, however hard you try. But when you put the story on paper and write it just the way the mind is telling it, with all your suffering and frustration and rage and sadness, then you can physically take a look at what is swirling around inside of you. You can see it brought into the material world in physical form. And finally, through the work, you can begin to understand it. When you do the work, you see who you are by seeing who you think other people are. Eventually, you come to see that everything outside of you is a reflection of your own thinking. You are the storyteller, the projector of all stories. And the world is the projected image of your thoughts. The judgments you're writing on your worksheet are going to become the material that you're going to use to do the work. You'll put each written statement one by one up against 4 questions and let each of them lead you to the truth. How does this feel? Does this feel pretty good to write all this down? It's kind of scary. The first time I did one, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying these things. Okay, even if you haven't finished, I'm going to go ahead and go to the 4 questions because you probably have enough material to at least get started. And you are absolutely free to continue this later on. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 questions. Question number 1, is it true? Number 2, can you absolutely know that it's true? Question 3 is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And question 4 is, who would you be without that thought? And after you've gone through the inquiry with these 4 questions, then the 3rd step of this process is to find some turnarounds. Find ways that the opposite is true. You can try turning things around to the other, to the self, and to the opposite. So this is an example that I cooked up from a potential and probably very common stressful thought about the workplace. Now, typically with the work, you would go through each statement one by one and do all 4 questions and turnarounds on each sentence. For the sake of time and the fact that this is a very, very simple first worksheet, we're going to kind of combine the statements into one global concept. So what I wrote here was, I am angry with John because he is a slacker. I work much harder than him. I want John to pull his weight in the office. John should get off Facebook. He should get organized. He should help out more. He should recognize how much more I do than him. I need John to realize that the workload is unfair and to step up to the plate. I need him to be appreciative of all that I do and also do more himself. John is lazy and a bad coworker. I don't ever want to feel that I'm doing all the work again. So let's start with, is it true? Your first reaction, especially if you're just starting to do the work, should be yes, right? Because this feels true for you. And you can probably cite dozens of anecdotal reasons of instances where you've done more work than John. But stop and take a breath. Can you absolutely know that this is true? Do you have metrics for every single thing that you do? Even if you have profit or RVUs or any other way to measure, aren't there always things going on that can't be measured? What if John is more effective, more efficient, more accurate? What if your boss gave him a job on the side that you're not aware of? What if John is working evenings or Saturdays? How do you react when you believe that you do more work than John? That sucks, doesn't it? My morale would be so low, and guess what? I'm probably going to do less work myself. And then in turn, I might get a lesser performance evaluation. I might not be offered a promotion, all because I'm worried that I'm doing more work than John. Also, whose business is it how much work John gets done? It's his. That's right. So you see how when I am mentally in John's business, I can't take care of my own business effectively anymore. Now, who would you be without that thought? Happy? More productive? Who gives a rat's ass about John, right? It's not the fact that I do more work than John that's making me unhappy. It's that I believe that thought, that I'm doing more work than John, that's making me unhappy. So let's turn it around. If I take the statement, John is a slacker, I could turn that around to, John is not a slacker. Find very specific examples of times when John really stepped up to the plate. Think about the other day when he really, really hustled and he was a great asset on that one project. Another turnaround you could do for John as a slacker is, I am a slacker. Find specific examples of times when you just really haven't been fully present, because not everybody can give 100% of ourselves 100% of the time, right? So here's another example that Katie uses, and this one's right there on your worksheet. Paul doesn't listen to me. I think that's number 1. So again, ask the 4 questions. Number 1, is it true? Yes, of course it's true. He's sitting there. He's clearly not listening to me. He's not looking at me. He's not acknowledging me. He hasn't heard a single word that I've said. Number 2, can you absolutely know that it's true? Are you in Paul's head? Have you ever not looked at someone, not acknowledged them, but still heard every single word that they've said? So the answer to number 2 is no. You can't know that it's absolutely true. Number 3 is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought, that Paul doesn't listen to me? Hurt, angry, depressed? It's a really horrible feeling to think that someone isn't listening to you. And number 4, who would you be without that thought that Paul doesn't listen to you? A lot happier, right? Yes. So let's find some turnarounds. For the statement, Paul doesn't listen to me, that could be turned around as follows. Number 1, Paul does listen to me. Find specific examples of ways or times that Paul listens to you. Number 2, another turnaround could be, I don't listen to Paul. Are you listening to Paul when you're thinking about Paul not listening to you? A third turnaround could be, I don't listen to myself. It's a true statement, right? One of my favorite things that I came across while I was preparing for this presentation was Katie doing the work with Oprah. Does anyone want to guess what Oprah inquired about? Her weight with Oprah. Yeah. So they asked questions on the statement, my body is too big. And this was incredible to watch because Oprah's job is to be a skeptic, right? She asked all the tough questions. It was really neat to see. And Katie asked her, who would you be without the thought that your body is too big? And she replied, I'd be joyful. I'd be able to go through my closet and get dressed in the morning without the thought, what's going to fit? I would just move through life without this issue. I could just let this go. And I could give so much energy to so many other things. And Katie responded, yes. And isn't that what you think you're going to have when you're at a size 10 or a size 8? And Oprah said, yes. And Katie said, skip all of that and just have it right here, right now. And then Oprah realized that her body is not the problem. It's her thinking about her body that is the problem. So those are all pretty easy, right? Those are examples that are all kind of flowy and up here. I'm going to move on to a more difficult one. Caitlin Flanagan was diagnosed with a metastatic recurrence of breast cancer that she thought she had seen the last of 5 years earlier. She heard the doctor say liver. She heard the doctor say lung. And both words sounded so much like death that for a while she couldn't hear anything else. She came across the work and she began inquiring on her situation. But there was one thing that she couldn't quite work out. So she went to see Katie herself. And I'm going to read you her story. These are her words. She said, I followed her down a long white hallway into a sitting room next to her bedroom, and I accepted a glass of cool water. And then I told her what was happening to me. Or rather, I read aloud from the manifesto of suffering that I'd written in anticipation of this moment. I read about having cancer and how I had 2 small children who needed me, and why my particular diagnosis was very bad, how the chemo was exhausting, how super scared I was, having no idea if the treatment was going to work, how I hated being bald, and on and on and on. When I finally gave her a chance to talk, I figured she was going to try and make me feel less scared about my prognosis, or convince me that even as a baldy, I could feel beautiful. Instead, totally out of left field, she said, your children need you. Is that true? I looked at her like she was out of her freaking mind. Yes, I said. They're 9 years old. They're little boys. They just finished 4th grade. To which she said, easy as pie, your children need you. Is that true? Now I was getting angry. I wanted to walk out of there, but I said, yes, it's true. My children obviously need me. End quote. And then, you freaky kook lady whose check I'm going to cancel the second I get out of here. And she said, just as calmly as if she were asking where I'd bought my sweater, "Where are they now?" "They're with their dad," I said, "my husband." At which point a tiny glimmer of light came on in my head, but I was so not going to notice that glimmer, because no way was I going over there. Then she said, just as placid as could be, "Is he good with the boys?" Of course I took it, hook, line, and sinker. "Oh yeah, he's the best dad in the world. And he does so much with them, and the three of them have a great relationship you cannot imagine. He should get Dad of the Year." And just as matter of fact as ever, she said, "Your children need you. Is that true?" I sat there and sat there and sat there, and then kaboom, in my mind, like you cannot believe, I realized that Katie had nailed it. It wasn't the cancer, it wasn't the chemo or the baldness that was keeping me in hell. It was the terror of thinking that if I didn't make it, my boys wouldn't either. But they would. Their dad would take care of them, and all our relatives and everyone at church. They'd be fine. They could and would make it without me, if they had to. And if you had been sitting in the garden outside Byron Katie's open window that summer day, overhearing first my fear, and then my shock, and then my confusion, and then my anger, you would also finally have heard my laughter. All thanks to the question that by now has changed my life. Oh, honey, is that true? Let's look at another more difficult one. Suppose you wrote something like this: "I'm angry at my father because he hit me as a child." It's easy to get stuck on questions 1 and 2 with this one, right? Is it true? Yes, you are angry. And yes, he did hit you as a child. Try writing this statement with your added interpretation: "I'm angry at my father because he hit me, and it means that." Maybe you would finish this statement with, "and it means that he doesn't love me." Now that you know what your interpretation is, you can take that to inquiry. Another useful prompt here is to apply should. My father shouldn't have hit me. And now you can be more open to discovering a deeper truth. And I'm not going to go into full inquiry on that particular example because it hits on some topics that I'm not qualified for, and I don't want to get too heavy today. But I invite you to check out some of the resources that I'm going to show you here momentarily. One of the reasons why I'm such a big proponent of the work, besides the fact that it is changing my life, I still have a lot of work to do myself, is that so much of it is absolutely free. If you go to thework.com, you'll have access to a ton of free resources here. She also has some links to videos of her doing the work with people, and you can also go on YouTube and find hours and hours more. As you can see, she also has some really scary topics on here, like politics, that I'm not presenting those here today, or maybe ever. But let's see. But these actually, I've watched those, and they're shockingly good. She has instructions for filling out a worksheet. So if you want to do this again later on your own, and you want to do it alongside her instructions, which obviously are going to be far better than mine, then you're free to do that. And she even has, are you ready for this? Where is it? Where's that helpline? There it is, number 3. She even has a Do the Work helpline with volunteers that staff this free helpline where you can call and get assistance doing the help. If you've done all the free things and you want to delve a little bit deeper into the work, she's written several books. These are the ones that I could fit into a screenshot. She has a couple more. I haven't read all these books, but the ones that I have read are absolutely excellent. And if you really want to drink the Kool-Aid, then you can go to one of her workshops. Every now and then I'll use the phrase, "it changed my life," to talk about the spaghetti I ate last night or the board game that I played last week. And obviously I'm kidding, but Byron Katie's process of inquiry truly did change my life. And now, when I get cut off on the freeway, I can very quickly, without a worksheet, move on to, I bet he's running late for a meeting. I hate feeling like that. I hope he gets there safely. And you know what? Even if this particular scenario isn't true, I can recognize how much better my life is without those negative thoughts. Because the story, he's a jerk, probably isn't true either. And it certainly doesn't make me feel happy. When my children challenge me about wearing pants, I can look beyond my initial frustration, which I cannot help but have, and see that they should be challenging me. This is perfectly normal and healthy for children their age. When that guy doesn't hold the door open for me on my way into work, I'm glad he's looking out for the safety of the hospital. He doesn't know me. I don't have my badge out. He might not have even seen me. And my boss, well, she's perfect, so there's nothing to be done there. For many people, life without their story is literally unimaginable. They've been living with it for so long, they have no reference for life without it. I don't know is a common answer to question number 4. Who would you be without that thought? Other people can answer by saying, I'd be free. I'd be peaceful. I'd be a more loving person. Without our stories, we are not only able to act clearly and fearlessly, but we also become a better friend and a better listener. We are people living happy lives. We are appreciation and gratitude that have become as natural as breath itself. I hope you found this helpful today, and I hope you feel inspired to explore it on your own. Thanks.
period. I ended and uploaded the Panopto, period. I shut down the equipment, period. And I left the mic stands behind the rack down by the stage, period.